What's going on, guys? It's Rogue Element here, and welcome to another Overwatch League news video. So, there have been a couple of news stories that have come out in the last week or so that I've been meaning to cover, and one thing of another has happened, and I'm finally getting around to talking about it now. So, I think there's about three different things we're going to be talking about in this video, so sit back. This may be a little bit of a long one, but this is important stuff. So, first of all, there was an update to the postseason made and posted on the Overwatch League official account. Basically going over a change that's going to be happening for the postseason, a change that we also coming with the spread of the Delta variant, and that is unfortunately that the in-person events in Dallas and in um, LA have been cancelled. So this is the statement that the league made. Our Overwatch 2021 season has been amazing in so many ways. We've seen the highest level of competition ever in professional Overwatch, held 4 epic global tournaments through our innovative partnership with the University of Hawaii and our minimum latency technology, and made many improvements to our live broadcast experience. Our entire team has been working hard over improvements over the past several months to welcome you, our incredible community, back to the live events for playoffs and grand finals in September. Unfortunately, since we originally announced plans for the postseason, the environment has changed significantly. After continued consultation with our teams, we are no longer confident that all of them would be able to travel to the United States with their full rosters. We have therefore made the difficult decision to pivot from live events centered around Dallas and Los Angeles and will instead return to Hawaii for the postseason competition. We will share more details in the coming days about how this will work, including updated dates for playoffs. The global nature of the Overwatch League is one of the most important strengths and core to the spirit of competitions, but beyond that, the health and safety of all of us remains a top priority. Thank you for your continued support of the Overwatch League and for your understanding this challenging situation. So obviously this is going to impact a lot of things. So there have been some mixed opinions about this change. A lot of the NA teams, and rightfully so, a lot of the NA teams are actually upset about this change because, in the grand scheme of things, you're keeping 3 teams safe in Asia for the sake of putting 5 teams at risk for traveling to Hawaii again. Not only that, but you're jet lagging them, you're taking them to a setup that isn't their own setup, and then you're basically taking them out of their comfort zone. Meanwhile, the APAC teams get to stay at home. They get their own beds, they get their own equipment, they get their own practice facilities. It's not exactly a competitive, integral environment that these teams are going to be competing in, because obviously the APAC teams are going to have a significant advantage. And yes, there is the argument, well, this is what's been happening all season. The NA teams have won 2 of those, and from my point of view, they've won 2 of those in spite of these impediments. It's not a good thing. It's, oh, holy crap, they actually did that. Like Dallas beating Shanghai and LA Gladiators beating Chengdu is an amazing feat in itself, and the fact that they've gone out of their own comfort zones. Meanwhile, these APAC teams have been sat at home practicing, not having to go anywhere. So that is the one thing, to one side to it. But this also affects teams that are trying to get into the playoffs. There is something happening with Atlanta that I'll go into as well. But if Paris make the playoffs, if they get past Washington, if they get past the Shock, which, yes, okay, it's unlikely that they go on a fairy tale run, but for competitive integrity, they have to accommodate for that just in case, and the league have just not done that. So if Paris make it to the playoffs and they have to go to Hawaii, none of their team can travel. None of their team is able to travel to Hawaii, thus they have to sign an emergency roster to compete in the playoffs, which means that none of this team that would have made it to the playoffs are actually going to get to compete in the playoffs. Do you see how fucked up that is? I know I swore, but that is really, really screwed up. And honestly, it's not fair for these teams. Some people say, well, life's not fair. Well, this is the promise that this league has made for a competitively level environment, and it's not level for every single team. It's specifically favoring specific teams. And on top of that, the league did not consult anybody. Nobody was consulted in terms of the players, in terms of the staff about this decision, and it was just made to say, oh, well, we can't have them all come to NA, so we'll just have the NA teams go to Hawaii, possibly risk getting COVID from the travels, and jobs are good. And, well, it's not, because they could have gone to Korea like they did last year. I don't think anybody would cared if they had gone to Korea. Clearly last year we saw that they were able to get their entire roster over to Korea in time, so there was no issue there. They just made this decision on a whim. Um, so obviously this coming weekend we're going to have the play-ins, but who knows when the playoffs are gonna actually take place after that. But it may be a little bit of a break. Now, just quickly touching on the Atlanta situation, as you all know, when they went to the Countdown Cup, they couldn't actually take Pelican because obviously the poor guy was suffering and recovering from a collapsed lung, which you're not allowed to legally or fly for quite a while. I think it's 2 to 3 weeks after in recovery from a collapsed lung that you're not allowed on an airplane for. So they couldn't take Pelican, arguably their best player all season, the player who they basically rely on to get them this far. He had to play on ping. Granted, it got them past Seoul. They had, I think he had 90 ping for the entirety of the Seoul series, but then when it came to face LA, he was going up, spiking up to 180 ping, and that is just not fair. That is a completely unlevel playing environment, and yeah, Atlanta are essentially fucked because Pelican isn't going to be able to fly again in time for the playoffs unless they significantly delay it. So then, yes, Pelican can fly again. But as it stands, as the current date for the playoffs, he's not going to be able to do it. And they're going to have to either play him on ping or they're going to have to take Edison and have a weakened roster. And that's nothing against Edison. That is that Pelican has just been their all-star player all season. Um, and Gator has actually spoken on this. He did go on a bit of a rant, but like Atlanta have been screwed. Three out of the 6 times of going to Hawaii, they've been screwed. So the first time they had flight delays, which meant that they got there late, they were jet lagged, and they essentially went out pretty much right away. Then this time they couldn't go with their all-star DPS player. They had to play on ping. They went out basically as soon as he started having ping issues. So who knows what's gonna happen next? And I honestly feel really bad for them. I feel especially bad for Paris because this is completely out of their control. But yeah, it's a shitty situation all around. And honestly, if the league can get them all of the teams to Korea, then they should do that rather than making them all go to Hawaii when not every team can make it to Hawaii, especially Paris. So moving over, we actually have an update from the Hangzhou Spark, not related to the playoffs. It's kind of related to the playoffs, but it's bad news. So today, the Hangzhou Spark was made aware of an incident involving MCD's in-game behavior. MCD's actions and comments has broken the stipulation of the player contract. It also against the Hangzhou Spark's team value. His action was not consistent with the expectation of the Hangzhou Spark players and staff. As stated, Zhengho MCD Lee player contract has been terminated from today. He will no longer serve the role of the Hangzhou Spark spec support player, the Hangzhou Spark organization. So, the Hangzhou Spark have been, since they've had issues with Crystal way back in season 1, they've been this no nonsense organization. They don't want to be messed around, and that's fair enough. All you've got to do is be a decent human being, and they have no issue with you. But when you're a Korean player going on to ranked and you're representing an organization like the Hangzhou Spark or any team within the Overwatch League, and frankly you're going out and being racist, then yeah, you probably don't deserve to be in the role that you're currently in. And that's what's happened here. MCD has essentially not only let himself down, but he's let his team down, and this is going to have major implications for the Hungry Spark going into play-in season, because they have to face the Philly Fusion next weekend, and MCD honestly has been the better flex support. He's been the one that's been in all season. Yes, we saw Coldest majority through the Countdown Cup, but he wasn't really the best. And you'd want MCD going into these big knockout Overwatch games, especially going up against Freddy Fusion and then the Soul Dynasty. And Spark are going to be going into this weekend. So it's essentially going to have to be another fairy tale run that they're going to have to go on if they want to make it into playoffs. And it sucks for them, but ultimately this was the right decision for them to make, and I don't really blame them. So I don't know where MCD's future lies, if he's going to even get picked up by another team. I don't think anybody is really going to want to have a player who's had a history like that on their team. Maybe the Valiant will pick him up next season because they don't seem to have issues with that. Obviously they picked up Crystal for this season, so who really knows? But yeah, those were the two main stories I wanted to cover. Obviously, there's going to be more information about how the playoffs is going to work going forward, and I will talk about that going forward whenever we get new information. And then I just want to quickly cover over the Hungry Sparks release of a player. It's actually really sad, but at the end of the day, he did this to himself. But before I wrap up, I'm going to quickly go over because Washington ended up choosing their playing partner opponents. So we know now that Washington are going to be playing Paris next weekend, which is going to be the first game, and that Boston are going to be playing Toronto. And the winner of the Paris and the Washington game will play the Shock, and then the winner of the Boston Toronto going to play Houston, and then whoever wins those two games in the finals goes to the playoffs. So yeah, that's how the plans are going to be working this week. Expect, if there are Preds available, expect a Preds video coming from myself and Joe, obviously. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!